In 1979, a teenage assistant hurries backstage at the Troubadour in Los Angeles to inform the Kaya promoters that Linda Ronstadt simply left the green room once more. The reason why she saw his name, not hers or the Eagles', on the schedule. She refused to accept it. And she kept that reason to herself for decades. However, Linda Ronstadt has now revealed the musician she truly hated after years of tactful interviews and reserved demeanors. Close the list. It isn't what you anticipated. This is the tale of the 7 performers Linda Ronstadt detested the most, the ones with whom she had conflicts, the ones who had deceived her, and the ones whose egos had inflicted scars that went beyond what the headlines ever showed. The Laurel Canyon's facade of tranquility crumbles in this shocking disclosure, giving way to acrimonious competition, scandal, and unreserved truth. Though few discuss the animosity that followed, you have undoubtedly heard of Linda Ronstadt's role in the Eagles' founding. When Ronstadt was already a big celebrity in the early 1970s, Don Henley began working with her as her drummer and backup vocalist. Before it wasn't, their early partnership was warm and wonderful. His ego blew out when the Eagles became a household name. Imagine the Sunset Strip being dominated by a band that used to open for Ronstadt. The decisive moment? A bitter dispute in 1975. Henley made a harsh remark about her musical selections backstage at the Universal Amphitheater, implying that she should limit herself to covers and allow the actual songwriters do the talking. Linda was denied entrance to her tour, so she didn't simply leave. Behind the scenes, friends and dates talked about insults and mounting animosity. Now brimming with confidence and cocaine-induced haughtiness, Henley allegedly declared she was too valuable for rock and roll. In turn, she never forgiven him for the betrayal, referring to him in private as a climber who had lost his soul. Egos weren't the only factor. Respect was at issue. Henley had stomped everywhere. It's doe-eyed. However, it wasn't the only altercation that caused damage. Another artist would emerge as soon as one conflict subsided. Go too far and a spontaneous moment can become a lifetime resentment. What began as curiosity swiftly descended into mayhem. Imagine raw energy in smoke-filled clubs. It was there that Linda once performed alongside the E60's most erratic frontman. Morrison, Jim. Met in 1968, where and when? Ronstadt was still making a name for herself in the male-dominated world, and the Doors were at their height. California rock's world. Their initial encounter was electrifying. At a secret after-party close to the Whiskey A Go-Go, Morrison, intoxicated with defiance and absinthe, brought Linda on stage, but the moment didn't end well. When he attempted to kiss her, it instead became a tumultuous moment of embarrassment. Crashing into her microphone stand in the middle of her performance. Whispers, not pictures, were used to record the moment. People believe they are gaining knowledge, but in reality, they are not. They are gaining insight into something that has been created in the mind of someone who is, sitting behind a typewriter. That night, as well as Morrison's subsequent mockery of her in interviews, calling her sweet but spineless, were things Linda would never forget. She nursed the burn for years under her calm smile. She once called Morrison a brilliant wreck who poisoned everything around him in her inner circle. She viewed him as the embodiment of rock's macho excess, which she had battled throughout her career. As the 1970s went on, intellectual conflicts turned out to be much more agonizing than interpersonal ones. Furthermore, no rivalry was as profound as the one that started with a charity concert and culminated in an underlying conflict of values. When politics were involved, the tension only increased. Anticipate sparks when two powerful voices clash over politics. And that's precisely what transpired between Neil Young and Linda Ronstadt. It began in the middle of the 1970s. Although they were known for speaking out against injustice, a 1976 joint benefit concert for farm laborers revealed a gap between them. Young rejected Ronstadt's repertoire as being overly commercial and wouldn't include any pop-leaning songs on the set list. He was being patronizing as he pushed his way to the center stage and waved away her suggestions. As the evening came to a close, Ronstadt sobbed as she left, and Young allegedly told reporters that she wasn't made for protest. The insult went deep. Being characterized as superficial by another activist was not only hurtful, but also betraying Linda's advocacy, which was rooted in her Mexican ancestry. She turned down every invitation to perform with Young after that day, regardless of how large the platform had been. Why was it worse? In interviews, Young would sometimes mention her, generally in a backhanded way, constantly reminding everyone of their ideological differences. Neil was the epitome of complete moralism to Linda. He was harsh in his execution but loud in his message. However, the recording studio itself was the scene of some of the most vicious altercations, as artistic conceit overcame trust and one possible partnership descended into insult. It was expected that their esteem for one another would result in cooperation. Rather, it became one of Linda's worst artistic failures. Frank Zappa first appeared on Linda's radio show in Los Angeles in 1974. She was intrigued by his avant-garde Sioux style and wanted to record a song he wrote. However, what started out as a creative discussion swiftly became into artistic conflict. Zappa publicly blasted her voice for being overly clean, rejected her suggestions, and accused her of attempting to transform his music into a radio jingle. When Zappa interrupted the band in the middle of a song during a practice, things became heated. He shouted, "This is what happens when you hand real music to a pop singer," in front of the entire group. Feeling humiliated and angry, Linda stormed away. Although she never discussed the episode in public, she said in private that Zappa was clever but cruel, and that not all of his wounds were caused by strangers. The ones who hurt her the most were sometimes those closest to her, the people she used to call friends. They were once in the same close-knit group in Laurel Canyon, but their friendship started to deteriorate. As a result, pressure perished. Throughout the 1970s, David Crosby and Linda shared stages in studios, but cooperation was practically impossible due to Crosby's drug-fueled anxiety and his developing ego. Crosby insisted Linda modify the voice key to the actual pitch during the production of a harmony track in 1978. What transpired was a public altercation that was reported in trade publications. Later, Crosby disparaged her in Rolling Stone, claiming that studio executives had fabricated her success. In response, Linda severed all connections and prohibited anyone in her band from mentioning his name. Crosby had turned into a warning to her about what? Real talent could be harmed by drugs, fame, and unbridled selfishness. With the advent of the New Wave era, Linda encountered a different kind of opposition, not from her own generation, but from younger voices intent on disparaging the past. Not all of the new faces brought by the late 1970s punk wave were welcomed. When Linda and Elvis Costello performed together at a Cleveland festival in 1979, they got into a fight. In front of reporters, Costello, who at the time represented the British punk-influenced new wave, made fun of Linda by referring to her as the brunch background music. In addition to the rage and insult, she was astounded by the arrogant, contemptuous tone of someone she had never even spoken to. When she approached him later that night, emotions erupted. Intoxicated and furious, Costello threw another insult and left. Her contempt was cemented in that instant. She saw Costello as a symbol of a new, cold, and cunning form of brutality in music. Even partnerships that were ideal on paper might fall apart in an instant, particularly if one partner allowed their imagination to take over. It should have been amazing on paper. Two excellent voices are Linda Ronstadt and Paul Simon. However, their brief partnership actually caused emotional harm. The two tried recording a duet for Simon's next album, .jo, in 1982. However, rehearsals quickly became icy. Perfectionist Simon would not stop interrupting Linda, providing uninvited advice and demanding that she rewrite lyrics that she had not consented to. Later, Linda told friends that working with Simon was like a principal talking down to you. There was never a completed track from the session, and although Simon never made any public remarks, Linda left with a promise that she would never collaborate with him again. It was more than simply the song to her. It has to do with honor. Linda Ronstadt decided to pursue diplomacy. She remained calm, composed, and never one to share personal problems while the rock world whirled around her in controversy and scandal drama. However, the truth was always present, hiding in the shows she declined to do and in the quiet she kept behind those cautious interviews. It is not a matter of resentment to share these stories now. Clarity is key. In addition to her talent, Ronstadt's career was influenced by her ability to persevere in the face of adversity, her silent defiance of toxic egos, and her refusal to allow male-dominated power structures to dictate her course. She is not merely resolving old scores and lifting the veil, rather, she is demonstrating to a new generation of artists, particularly women, that being steadfast is not a sign of weakness but rather of legacy. Maybe that's the true narrative here, not just about who Linda Ronstadt detested, but also about how she managed to survive them all.